Husband and whole family kicked, wife out for being barren, unaware she was a secret billionaire daughter. He didn't just betray her, he watched in silence as his entire family threw her out into the night. That evening, the Miller house glowed with warm light and cruel words. Margaret Miller's voice rang through the living room, sharp as glass. "You've cursed this family, Emma. 5 years and no child, what good are you as a wife?" Emma stood near the doorway, clutching her small suitcase, tears silently streaking her face. Her husband Daniel stood by the staircase, arms crossed, saying nothing. The man she had loved, defended, and built her life around couldn't even meet her eyes. She whispered, "I loved you all as my own." Daniel's reply cut through her heart like ice. "Love doesn't build a family, Emma. A child does." He handed her divorce papers at the ready, his mother's approval glowing behind him like a curse. And then, without a single glance back, he turned away toward a woman named Ava, toward a future he believed was better. To them, Emma was nothing, a barren wife, a failure, a burden to be erased. But what none of them knew was that the woman they threw out that night carried a truth powerful enough to destroy every lie they had built. Because beneath her silence, behind that small wooden box she guarded under her bed, lay her real name, Emma West, heiress to the multi-billion-dollar empire that kept their businesses alive. And the man who threw her out of his house had built his entire life on her money. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about a woman who lost everything and remembered she was born with more than they could ever take. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, you silence Emma's voice all over again. Click that button to stand with every woman cast aside, every soul who chose power over pain. Tell me in the comments where, are you watching from tonight? The scent of burning toast snapped through the quiet morning. Emma Miller flinched, rushing to the kitchen stove, her hands trembling slightly as she turned off the gas. She was 28, graceful in movement but visibly tired, her eyes carrying the soft weight of someone who gave too much of herself to keep a house peaceful. The clock read 5:42 a.m. She was already behind. From the living room, the low buzz of a phone screen glowed across Daniel Miller's face. 32, tall, clean-cut, and once charming, now mostly distant. He sat slouched on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He didn't notice Emma watching him, or maybe he didn't care. "Breakfast will be ready in 5, Emma said softly, trying to sound cheerful. Daniel didn't look up. "Yeah, just don't burn it this time." His voice wasn't cruel, but it was cold, the kind of tone that leaves bruises you can't point to. Before 2, she became Emma Miller. She was Emma West, daughter of Eleanor West, CEO of West Group Holdings, one of the wealthiest families in the country. Their family estate had marble floors, private chefs, and an empire of companies built by ruthless intelligence. Emma grew up surrounded by luxury, yet she often sat by her window, watching ordinary people walk by and laugh freely, something money never gave her. At 21, she met Daniel at a university charity event. He wasn't rich. He was a scholarship student, ambitious and bright. He talked about building a simple, honest life, and Emma fell for him instantly. For the first time, someone looked at her not as an heir, but as a woman. Against her mother's warning, she left everything, her inheritance, her family name, even her identity, to legally marry him as Emma Miller. She used her vast resources one last time to create a new, clean identity, telling Daniel it was a small inheritance from a distant relative. She wanted to be loved for Emma, not for West. Her father died a year later. The will left her half of West Group held quietly in a private trust. Only one person knew, Mr. Jacobs, the family's lifelong legal advisor. Before she left, Jacobs had insisted she keep one secret, emergency-only contact number, and the legal papers to her trust. Those papers stayed locked inside a small wooden box she kept under her bed unopened since the day she left home. Emma plated breakfast with care, eggs, toast, a touch of butter. Her mother-in-law, Margaret Miller, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 50s, entered with the authority of someone who believed the house was hers alone. She was kind to outsiders, but to Emma, she spoke with a constant undertone of judgment. "You're up late again, Emma," Margaret said, glancing at the slightly burnt toast. "A good wife keeps her home spotless and gives her husband children. You're halfway there. Emma froze for a second. The knife. In her hand, hovering over the butter dish, she smiled politely. I'll do better tomorrow. Daniel chuckled under his breath, still scrolling. You've been saying that for years. It was meant as a joke, but it wasn't one. The words landed heavy. Emma lowered her eyes, hiding the flicker of pain that almost surfaced. She carried the plates to the table, every step steady as a soldier walking through emotional landmines. After everyone ate, Emma stood by the window, watching sunlight slide across the kitchen floor. She could hear Margaret humming softly, Daniel tapping away at his phone, the clinking of dishes. It was an ordinary morning, painfully ordinary. Her mind wandered to her old life, the grand breakfasts with her father, where she used to sit beside him reading stock reports while he quoted philosophy. Control your silence, he once said, and you control the world. She smiled sadly. She had mastered silence, but lost her world. Was this the life? And she traded everything for? Still, she believed in love. She believed that patience could heal distance, that kindness could melt coldness. She told herself Daniel was just stressed that one day they'd laugh again like they used to. She whispered small prayers no one heard. Later that morning, as she was making the bed, Daniel walked in. His tie was loose, his cologne sharp. You should clean under the bed sometime, he said casually. You keep too much junk. Emma froze. Her eyes flicked to the small wooden box, half hidden beneath the frame, the one that held her secret. Daniel bent down, his hand brushing the edge of the box. What's this? Her heart leaped. Just old letters, she said quickly, stepping forward, her hand covering his. He smirked, unconvinced but uninterested. Don't start hiding things from me, Em. Secrets ruin families. As he left the room, she exhaled slowly, pulling the box closer, clutching it protectively against her chest. For a moment, she thought she heard her mother's voice in her head, soft, warning, almost whispering through time. The people who judge you today will one day kneel to the truth you've hidden. Emma placed the box back under the bed, locking it again, unaware that Daniel's eyes had briefly flicked back, curious, calculating. He smiled faintly before leaving for work. And for the first time, Emma felt a small chill she couldn't explain, as if the air itself was warning her. She didn't know that by tomorrow morning, whispers would start whispers that would turn her love into a weapon. The slam of the kitchen door shattered the morning calm. A glass rolled off the counter and broke into pieces, scattering like small diamonds across the tile. Emma jumped, her hands still wet from washing dishes. Margaret Miller, her mother-in-law, stood near the pantry, face flushed, voice rising. This family is falling apart, Margaret hissed, gripping the pantry, edge of the counter. Daniel's business is dropping, he's stressed, and that girl, she pointed sharply toward the dining room, still hasn't given us a grandchild after 5 years of marriage. At the table sat Sophie Miller, Daniel's younger sister, 25, pretty and spoiled by comfort. She sipped her orange juice and whispered back, maybe she's the reason nothing's working out. Some women just bring bad luck. Emma froze behind the half-closed kitchen door, their words slicing through her like cold wind. She wanted to step in, to defend herself, but her voice caught in her throat. She wiped her hands quietly, pretending she hadn't heard. She moved around the kitchen, gathering broken glass, her movements slow and careful. Her mother's voice from long ago echoed softly in her mind. Silence doesn't mean weakness, Emma. It's how we watch people reveal themselves. Her mother, Eleanor West, had taught her that in a world of power and cruelty, patience was sharper than any weapon. Eleanor believed in timing, let them speak. Words have a way of building their own traps. Emma straightened her back, forcing her breath steady. She didn't want to cry, not here, not where they could see. Daniel walked in just then, dressed in a crisp white shirt, tie loose around his neck. What's going on? He asked, frowning at the tension. Margaret crossed her arms. Ask your wife. Maybe she can explain why everything in this house feels cursed. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. Mom, not now. Please. He turned to Emma briefly, his tone softer but detached. Ignore it, okay? She's just worried about me. That one sentence, worried about me, said everything. He wasn't standing with her. He was standing away from her. Emma nodded quietly. I understand. Sophie smirked from the corner. You always do. As the family left the kitchen, Emma stayed behind, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. For a moment she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "You chose this. You chose love over comfort." She thought about her old life, marble halls, private dinners, her father's booming laugh as he talked about mergers and expansion. She used to think wealth made people cold. Now she realized poverty could be colder. The Miller family had no empire, no power, just pride, the kind that needed someone to blame. And Emma was the easiest target. She carried breakfast plates to the sink, her gaze lowering to Daniel's phone, left charging on the counter. The screen lit up Ava calling. Her breath hitched. The name was unfamiliar, the emoji intimate. Her heart started to race, but her face didn't change. She simply stared, frozen, watching the phone buzz once, twice, 3 times before going silent. The sound of the vibration echoed in her chest long after it stopped. She didn't touch it, she didn't say a word. But her mind began, spinning quietly, connecting the small, strange moments she'd ignored. Daniel working late, new shirts she hadn't bought, the faint trace of perfume she didn't wear. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe Ava was just a coworker. Maybe. But the maybe already burned. Later that afternoon, she stood by the kitchen window, watching Daniel drive away. His car disappeared down the road. Margaret and Sophie's laughter echoed faintly from the living room, sharp, dismissive, unkind. Emma leaned against the wall, her eyes falling on the wedding photo, hanging above the dining table, her smile bright, his arm around her. That photo had always felt safe. Now it looked like evidence of a lie slowly unraveling. She whispered softly, "You said secrets ruin families, Daniel. I wonder whose secret will." The sunlight shifted, landing on the edge of the counter on Daniel's phone, left behind. The screen glowed faintly again as a message appeared. Emma's eyes caught one line, before it faded. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Ava." Her fingers tightened around the dish towel, heart pounding, yet her expression stayed calm, eerily calm. She turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs without a word. By the next morning, those whispers wouldn't just be words, they'd become the match that set her marriage on fire. The clang of silverware hitting the plate snapped the table into silence. Daniel's father, George Miller, 60, stern-faced and proud, set his fork down and cleared his throat. "This family needs a child," he said firmly, his tone slicing through the quiet. "A name must continue, Daniel. 5 years of marriage, and still nothing?" Emma's hand froze midair, the spoon trembling slightly. Across from her, Daniel's eyes flicked up, blank but sharp, as if silently warning her not to speak. Margaret leaned forward, voice smooth but venomous. "Maybe it's time Emma got a checkup again. Sometimes, women have hidden problems." The words landed like a slap. Emma forced a gentle smile, the kind that hides pain too deep to show. "I've been checked," she said softly. Sophie smirked. "Doctors can be wrong, you know." George nodded, taking another sip of water. "Then get a second opinion. Or maybe Daniel should consider." He paused deliberately, letting his gaze drift toward his son. "Other options, before it's too late." Daniel's fork scraped against the plate, his jaw tightening. "Dad, please." But the seed was already planted. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. As the family continued eating, Emma's mind drifted to a memory, a flashback from months ago. White walls, the quiet hum of a clinic, a doctor, middle-aged and kind, smiling gently as he looked over the results. "You're completely healthy, Mrs. Miller. There's no issue with you at all." He hesitated before adding softly, "Sometimes it's the husband who should also get tested." Emma had smiled politely back then, holding her purse tightly in her lap. "He's been busy," she had said, even though she knew that wasn't the reason. That day, she walked out of the clinic knowing one thing with crystal clarity. The problem wasn't her, but she never said it. She knew Daniel's pride was fragile, and his family's pressure was immense. Telling them the truth would humiliate him, and she loved him too much for that. Her silence had always been her shield and her curse. Back at the dinner table, Margaret's tone softened, pretending to be sympathetic. "Emma, darling, I'm sure you're doing your best, but a wife's duty is to give her husband heirs. We only want what's best for both of you." Emma's throat tightened. "I understand, Mother." Daniel spoke suddenly, too loudly. "Enough! This isn't dinner talk." George looked unimpressed. Then handle it, son. We won't live forever to see this family name vanish. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stabbed at his food, not meeting Emma's eyes. She sat there motionless, watching her husband fold under his family's weight and turn that frustration inward toward her. A subtle shift had begun. Daniel used to defend her. Now, he just let things happen. She excused herself from the table quietly. I'll bring dessert. As she stepped into the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, gripping the edge hard. Her chest rose and fell with the effort to stay composed. She had done every test, every prayer, every hope. Still, it was never enough. Her mother's old words whispered back, they'll blame what they don't understand. Don't fight them, make them show their truth first. Emma straightened, wiped her tears, and forced a smile before carrying dessert back to the table. When she returned, Daniel was laughing. The kind of hollow, forced laugh that didn't reach his eyes. George asked lightly, you did your test. 2, right, Daniel? The room went silent. Emma's hand trembled, but she kept her face calm. Daniel smiled too quickly. Of course I did. Everything's fine. His tone was smooth. Practice, but Emma saw it. The faint twitch in his jaw. The way his fingers gripped the glass too tightly. Her heart sank. He was lying. She knew it the same way she knew his phone buzzed at odd hours, and his eyes no longer softened when he looked at her. The first crack wasn't in their marriage, it was in the illusion she'd built around it. That night, after everyone went to bed, Emma sat by the window alone. The moonlight brushed against her face as she stared into the quiet street. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, patient, calm, and breaking silently. She whispered to herself, truth doesn't hide forever. Downstairs, in the faint glow of the living room, Daniel's phone buzzed again unseen. The screen lit up with a name, Ava, and this time, the message read, miss you already. Same place tomorrow? Emma turned from the window as if she'd felt something shift in the air. A faint instinct, the kind that comes before a storm. Foreshadowing line. By the next sunrise, love would no longer sound like devotion, it would sound like betrayal. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic chime. Emma stepped out, clutching a small lunch bag, her heels echoing across the marble floor of Miller & Co. Interiors, Daniel's company, which she had funded with her dowry, believing it was his dream. She decided to surprise him. After the painful dinner the night before, she wanted to remind him that love still existed between them. But as she reached his office door, laughter floated out, soft, flirtatious, unfamiliar. She froze. Through the half-open blinds, she saw Daniel leaning back in his chair, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at her in months. Sitting on his desk was a young woman, tall, stylish, her legs crossed, wearing Daniel's suit jacket like it belonged to her. The woman twirled Daniel's pen between her fingers and said, laughing, you really shouldn't keep your wife waiting so long for attention. Daniel chuckled. Let's not talk about her. The room tilted for Emma. Her breath caught. She tried to step back, but her bag slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The laughter stopped. Daniel turned sharply, eyes widening. Emma? Emma bent to pick up the bag, her hands shaking. I brought you lunch, she whispered. Daniel cleared his throat, standing quickly. You didn't have to. The woman smiled politely, as if enjoying the scene. Oh, so you're Emma. Daniel told me so much about you. Emma forced a faint smile. And you are? Ava Cole, she said smoothly, extending her hand. I'm the PR manager he hired to try and land the West Group account. Emma didn't take her hand. Her gaze fell on the desk. A second coffee cup beside Daniel's, lipstick mark faintly visible. Everything clicked. The late nights, the new cologne, the coldness, the lies. The business dropping wasn't just stress. It was this. But Emma didn't cry. She simply nodded, her voice calm, too calm. I see. Then I won't interrupt your work. She turned to leave. As she walked out, Ava's business card slipped from the desk and fluttered to the floor. Emma picked it up automatically and froze. Printed below Ava's name were the words, West Group PR Division, her mother's company, her world, her past. Daniel, in his blind ambition, was trying to do business with the very empire she owned, using his mistress who worked there as an in. The universe had just connected the dots she'd tried to hide. She slipped the card into her purse, her expression unreadable. Outside the building, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Maybe fate isn't done with me yet." By the next evening, that card would no longer be a secret, it would be a weapon. The shouting started before the lights even came on. "Enough is enough, Emma," Margaret's voice thundered from the living room. The sound jolted through the house like thunder. Emma stood at the top of the stairs, clutching the wooden box to her chest. She'd been staring at it all evening, the sight of Ava's business card burning in her pocket. Downstairs, Daniel's parents stood together, rigid, furious. Daniel was there too, silent, leaning against the wall, his face unreadable. "What's happening?" Emma asked carefully, stepping down each stair, her heartbeat quick and heavy. Margaret's eyes were sharp, gleaming with accusation. "Don't you play innocent, girl? Do you think we don't know? You've brought nothing but bad luck into this house. You've cursed our family with your barrenness and your lies." Emma blinked, her lips parting in shock. "What are you talking about? Lies?" George stepped forward, waving a sheet of paper printed gossip from a local community blog. "People are talking, Emma. Everyone knows his business is sinking and that Daniel still has no heir. You're making us a joke." Emma's voice trembled. "You think this is my fault? Because I can't." "Can't?" Margaret interrupted, her tone slicing through the air. "You won't. You're selfish. You've ruined our son's future." Her hands shook. "You know that's not true. I've done everything I could." Daniel looked away, his jaw tight. "Mom, please." But Margaret cut him off. "You stay out of this. If you had been a real man, you'd have fixed this by now." The room fell into cold silence. Emma turned to Daniel, eyes wide. "Say something. Please." He exhaled slowly, his voice calm but distant. "What do you want me to say, Emma? They're not wrong." Emma felt something in her chest collapse, a quiet, invisible shatter. "I left everything for you," she whispered. "My family, my name, my home. I believed in you." Daniel's eyes flicked to hers briefly, soft for a second, then hard again. "You believed in a dream. But love doesn't build a family, Emma. A child does." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Her breath caught. "What's that?" "Divorce papers." She froze, staring at the envelope like it was a loaded weapon. "You already had them prepared?" she whispered, disbelief breaking into her voice. Daniel nodded, his face still emotionless. "I've been thinking about this for months. I didn't want to do it this way, but you gave me no choice." Emma's voice broke. "No choice? I gave you everything I had. You gave me emptiness," he said quietly. "I need someone who can give me the future I want." Ava's name didn't have to be spoken. It hung there between them, poisonous and understood. Margaret snatched the envelope from Daniel's hand and threw it onto the coffee table. "Sign it and leave," she said coldly. "This house is in my son's name. You don't belong in this house anymore." Emma stared at the papers, the ink on them blurring through her tears. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she lifted her head, her voice trembling but still strong. "I loved you all as my own," she said softly. "Even when you treated me like a stranger." George scoffed. "Save your pity. You were never one of us." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the heavy silence. Emma looked at Daniel one last time. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." He met her gaze cold, final. "Maybe, but at least it'll be my choice." She walked past him slowly, the sound of her steps echoing like heartbreak itself. Upstairs, she packed her suitcase in silence. Each item she folded felt like burying a memory. Their first date dress, their wedding photo. The scarf he once said made her look like a sunrise. Her hands paused on the small wooden box. She took it out, tucking it safely inside the suitcase. The last piece of her real self, her past, her power. When she came down, suitcase in hand, the whole family stood watching like she was an intruder leaving their kingdom. Sophie leaned against the doorway, smirking. "You'll come crawling back someday, Emma. People like you always do." Emma stopped at the door, turned slowly, her tear-streaked face now calm, almost eerily calm. "No," she said softly. "You'll be the ones crawling." As Emma stepped out of the house that night, the cold air hit her face like reality itself. The front door slammed behind her, but for a moment, she didn't move. The echo of Daniel's voice still lingered sharp, final. "You should have given me a child, Emma. Maybe then, I'd still love you. The words sliced through her like a blade. She turned once, hoping, just hoping he would open the door, call her name, ask her to stay. For years he'd been her home, her reason to believe that love could exist outside wealth and bloodlines. And suddenly, she remembered a softer time, their first year of marriage. Rain tapping on the window, Daniel asleep on the couch after a long day, her head resting on his chest. He had smiled in his sleep and mumbled, "You're my peace, Em." She had believed it, with all her heart. Now, standing in the same driveway where he once kissed her under falling snow, she was nothing but a shadow. The porch light flickered once before going out completely, as if even the house had chosen its side. Her knees weakened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I gave you everything," she whispered into the night. "Even the parts of me that didn't survive you." Then through her tears, she clutched the handle of her suitcase, the wooden box safe inside. Her father's name was carved faintly on the lid. That was the moment her heart broke. But her fire was born. Because even as she walked away from the house that had rejected her, a voice inside whispered her father's words. "When they forget your worth, my girl, that's when you remember who you are." The wind caught her hair as she stood on the sidewalk, alone. She looked back at the house her money had bought, but his name had stolen. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, old, non-smartphone. She turned it on for the first time in 5 years and dialed the only number she had memorized. "Mr. Jacobs," she whispered, her voice shaking but cold. "It's Emma. He did it. He threw me out." There was a pause, and then a calm, steady voice replied, "I've been waiting for this call, Miss West. Stay where you are. A car will be at your location in 5 minutes." By the time the sun rose again, the woman they threw out would no longer exist, but the air they betrayed would. The sound of rain hitting the floor-to-ceiling penthouse window was deafening. Emma sat on a plush sofa in a sprawling, dimly lit apartment, a West Group corporate safe house. Her suitcase sat half open beside her, clothes spilling out like remnants of another life. Mr. Jacobs had brought her here directly. Her hands, no longer trembling, rested on the small wooden box. The same box Daniel had once mocked, the same one that carried the part of her she'd buried for love. She set it down on the mahogany coffee table. Her eyes burned, not from tears, she had no more of those left, but from something deeper, resolve. Her fingers fumbled with the old lock. It took 3 tries before it finally clicked open. The sound was sharp and final, like a chapter closing. Inside lay her truth, a birth certificate, Emma West. A thick folder of West Group shared documents, and a faded black and white photo, a young girl laughing beside a tall man in a suit. Her father, Richard West, the billionaire industrialist who had built an empire with his own hands and raised her with iron principles and soft words. She picked up the photo, her thumb brushing across her father's face. Suddenly, memory poured through her like light. A flashback. A grand dining room bathed in morning sun. A younger Emma stood beside her father, arguing. "I don't want this life, Dad. I want something real, love that isn't about money." "Love without truth will still destroy you," Richard said gently. "I don't care. I need to try." He sighed, eyes sad but proud. "Then go, my girl. But when they hurt you," he placed his hand over her heart. "Remember who you are." The memory faded, leaving her breathless. She looked at the papers again, the weight of her name staring back at her West. The family Daniel's mistress worked for, the empire Daniel unknowingly despised, her inheritance, her bloodline, her power. She had left it all behind for love. Now it was time to take it back. She gathered the documents, laying them neatly on the table. Her movements were calm, deliberate, the same way her father used to move when making billion-dollar decisions. Mr. Jacobs, who had been waiting patiently by the door, stepped forward. "Miss West?" She looked up, and the patient, tired Emma Miller was gone. In her place was someone else. "Mr. Jacobs," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I want you to find out everything. How my dowry was spent, who this Ava Cole is, and how fast we can liquidate Miller & Co. Interiors." A pause, then his voice, surprised and warm. "It's good to have you back, Miss West." She glanced at the photo of her father. Her eyes hardened. "It's time," she said quietly. "I want everything back." Silence filled the room, heavy, final, powerful. The rain outside eased to a drizzle. Emma stood, pulling her hair into a neat bun, her posture straightening as if she were putting on invisible armor. The girl who once ran from her, last, the name was gone. In her place stood Emma West, the heir, the daughter, the woman who would rebuild what they tried to break. By morning, the world that had thrown her away would learn her name and tremble when they heard it again. The sound of paper hitting the table echoed like a gunshot. $200,000, Mr. Jacob said flatly. Transferred from your dowry account over the last 6 months. Emma didn't flinch. She sat in the glass-walled office of West Legal Associates, her posture poised, her expression unreadable. Outside, the city lights shimmered like silent witnesses. Where did it go? She asked, her voice cool. Jacobs adjusted his glasses and slid a document toward her. He used your dowry fund as startup capital for his company, but the company is failing because he's been siphoning the money. He used it to set up a new private PR firm for his mistress, Ava Cole. He literally stole from you to build her a company. Emma leaned back, crossing her arms. So he wasn't just having an affair, he was funding it with my money. Every cent, Jacobs confirmed. He probably assumed you'd never check. After all, his lips curved faintly. You were supposed to be the naive wife, weren't you? Emma's eyes lifted to meet his. Not anymore. For years, she had stayed quiet. She believed love was patience, that silence could heal a man's pride. But sitting there now, watching her husband's betrayal laid out in black ink, she realized silence had only protected him, never her. Jacobs watched her carefully. He was in his 50s, calm and loyal, the same man who had once stood beside her father during board meetings. To him, she wasn't just a client. She was the last piece of the West legacy. Miss West, he said slowly, are you sure you want to do this publicly? Once we act, there's no turning back. Emma's gaze was steel. He made my love a lie. I'll make his. Lies the truth everyone sees. Jacobs nodded, a spark of pride in his eyes. Then we'll begin quietly. I've already assigned an investigator, someone discreet. The door opened, and a woman stepped in, tall, confident, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a calm presence. Emma, meet Clara Hayes, private investigator, Jacobs said. Clara offered a hand. I've worked on corporate and domestic cases for the West family before. I'll get you what you need. Emma shook her hand firmly. I don't want pity. I want facts. The next days unfolded like a chess match. Clara tailed Daniel's movements, gathering photographs, call logs, and hotel receipts. Every night, she reported back to Emma, who listened silently, her face calm but her hands clenched. Through hidden recordings and financial traces, they discovered more than an affair. They uncovered systematic theft. Daniel had been siphoning Emma's dowry money into Ava's new firm, Ava Cole PR, disguising it as marketing expenses for his own failing company. The audacity almost made her laugh. He really thought I'd never see this, she murmured one night, scanning a printout. Clara raised an eyebrow. Men like him never imagine the woman they underestimate could destroy them. Emma looked up, her voice quiet but sharp. He will. Jacobs assembled a thick folder of evidence, photos of Daniel and Ava together, bank transfers, corporate emails. Everything's ready, he said, closing the file with a snap. We can file the fraud report and serve the divorce papers simultaneously. Emma stood by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Her reflection looked different now, no longer the fragile wife, but the heir her father raised. When do we do it? She asked. Jacobs exchanged a look with Clara, then smiled faintly. I think the timing should be poetic. Emma turned, curious. What do you mean? Jacobs opened his lawn calendar and read aloud. Daniel Miller's new engagement announcement 2 days from now, at the Grandview Hotel. Her lips curved the smallest hint of a smile, dangerous and calm. Perfect. She picked up the folder, closing it against her chest. He wanted a public future. I'll give him one, just not the kind he expects. As she walked out of the office, her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step echoing like the countdown to justice. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, distant but certain, a storm approaching. Foreshadowing line. By the time Daniel stood beneath the lights at his engagement, the papers he feared most would already have his name on them. The gavel struck the desk with a sharp crack. Case number 4000, 721 Miller versus Miller. The packed courtroom fell into silence. Journalists whispered at the back, their pens poised. Every seat was filled lawyers, onlookers, Daniel's smug parents, and Ava Cole. Sitting elegantly beside him in a pale cream suit, Daniel adjusted his tie, his confidence glowing. Finally, he muttered to Ava, smirking. She'll sign, and I'll be free. Ava smiled back, slipping her hand into his. You'll be headline news by noon. The man who left a barren wife for true love. The words made Daniel's grin widen. But as the side door opened, the air in the room shifted. Emma walked in. She wasn't the broken woman he had thrown out. She moved with quiet power, dressed in a black tailored suit, her hair pinned neatly, her posture unshaken. Every step echoed confidence. Daniel's smirk faltered. Margaret gasped. Emma? She whispered. What is she wearing? Who does she think she is? Emma ignored them all. She took her seat beside her lawyer, Mr. Jacobs. Good morning, Mrs. Miller, the judge said. Are you representing yourself? Jacobs rose before she could answer. No, Your Honor. My client, Mrs. Emma West Miller, is represented by West Legal Associates. The name hung in the air like thunder. Daniel frowned, confused. West? Jacobs continued smoothly, handing a file to the clerk. Mrs. Miller, or rather Miss West, is the sole heir and majority shareholder of West Group Holdings. We will be filing under her legal birth name. A ripple of gasps spread across the room. Margaret covered her mouth. West Group? The billionaires? Ava blinked rapidly, whispering, That's impossible. Daniel's entire face drained of color. What did you just say? Jacobs didn't even glance at him. Your Honor, we are petitioning for divorce on the grounds of adultery and gross financial misconduct. We have proof of Mr. Miller's infidelity and proof that he misappropriated over $200,000 of my client's funds to establish a private company for his mistress. Daniel shot up, slamming his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. She's lying. Emma turned her head, slowly toward him, calm, expressionless. Lying, Daniel? Like when you told everyone I was the reason we couldn't have children? Or when you lied about getting tested? When we both know the doctor said I was fine? A few people gasped. The judge raised an eyebrow. Order in the court, Jacobs continued, voice steady. Here is the proof of the transfers. Bank records, digital authorization, and the business registration for Ava Cole PR, all funded by my client's dowry account. He placed the documents in front of the judge. The silence was crushing. Ava shifted uncomfortably. Daniel, what is this? She whispered. He stared at her, speechless. Sweat dotted his forehead. Emma's gaze remained fixed on him. You thought I was weak. You thought you could take everything and walk away. But you were stealing from a company you didn't even know I owned. The judge cleared his throat. Given the overwhelming evidence, the court recognizes Mrs. West Miller's petition. Divorce is granted in her favor. A full freeze is placed on all assets related to Miller & Co. and Ava Cole PR pending fraud repayment. Daniel sank into his chair, his voice breaking. Emma, please. I didn't know. She stood, interrupting him with the softest voice imaginable. You knew enough to betray me. Her words were calm, but her eyes, cold and final, told him there was no mercy left. Jacobs closed his briefcase. Your Honor, one last detail. The residence Mr. Miller and his family currently live in. We have records showing it was purchased entirely with my client's funds, which Mr. Miller fraudulently put in his own name. We are petitioning for immediate seizure of the property as partial repayment. Margaret gasped audibly, clutching her husband's arm. That can't be true, Jacob smiled faintly. It can, and it is. The judge nodded. Then the property is seized, effective immediately. The occupants will vacate within 48 hours. The courtroom erupted, reporters scribbling, cameras flashing, whispers rising like wildfire. Ava stood up, her eyes darting from Emma to Daniel, realization dawning. You told me she had nothing, she hissed. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Ava, wait. But she stepped away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she stormed out. Emma watched them silently, then turned to the judge and bowed her head. Thank you, Your Honor. The gavel fell again. Case closed. Final beat. Karma realized outside. Cameras flashed as Emma stepped down the courthouse steps. She didn't speak, didn't look back. The press shouted questions. Miss West, is it true you're heir to West Group? But she kept walking, her face serene under the morning sun. Behind her through the glass doors, Daniel sat slumped in defeat, staring at the papers that had destroyed him. Mr. Jacobs joined her at the car, opening the door. Justice served? Miss West. Emma paused before getting in, her voice soft. Justice began today. Revenge is still waiting. Because tomorrow, the world wouldn't just read about his downfall, they'd watch it unfold. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Daniel's trembling hands hovered over the desk, eyes fixed on the screen flashing with notifications. Account frozen. Contract terminated. Legal hold. He slammed his fist down. No, no, no! Papers scattered everywhere. His once polished office, once filled with clients, deals, and quiet arrogance, now felt like a collapsing cage. His assistant stood by the door, pale. Sir, West Group just called every one of our major vendors and partners. They told them to either drop us or lose the West Group account forever. We've been blacklisted. Everyone is pulling out. Daniel's voice cracked. They can't do that. The assistant swallowed hard. They can, sir. They own everything. The words hit harder than a punch. They own everything. Emma's name echoed in his head like thunder west. He had laughed at her silence. Now it was destroying him. By afternoon, his office phone was dead, his email locked, and his company logo being taken down from the glass wall. Daniel sat there, staring at his reflection in the dark computer screen. For the first time, he saw himself not as a victim, but as the fool who built his life on lies. Ava entered, sunglasses on, phone in hand. She didn't look angry, just bored. You could have told me, she said flatly. Daniel looked up, desperate. Told you what? That your money wasn't really your money. She scrolled through her phone, showing him a headline. West Group Harris wins divorce case, husband exposed for fraud and infidelity. Ava's smirk faded into disgust. You're broke, Daniel. And I don't do broke. She tossed her apartment key onto his desk and turned to leave. Ava, wait. She didn't. The door closed with a quiet final click. The spiral consequences arrive. The next week was a blur of humiliation. Banks refused his calls. His parents' home, the same one Emma's money had bought, was repossessed. The locks changed. Reporters camped outside their new tiny rental, shouting questions about fraud and infidelity. Even his own family turned on him. George refused to answer his calls. Margaret hid inside, ashamed of the headlines. Daniel walked through his empty, repossessed house one last time, past the eviction notices, whispering, I just wanted a family. But the silence mocked him back. One night, in the rain, he found himself outside the towering gates of West Group headquarters, the very place Emma had once been too humble to enter. He looked up at the massive building, its windows gleaming like eyes watching him. His clothes were soaked, his shoes ruined, but he didn't care. He pressed against the intercom, voice shaking. Please, I need to talk to her. Tell Emma I'm sorry. Tell her I'll do anything. Security guards approached, one of them holding out a hand. Sir, you need to leave. Daniel shook his head, rain pouring down his face like punishment. I just need 5 minutes. Please. The guard's expression didn't change. Mrs. West doesn't take unannounced visitors. The name made him freeze. Mrs. West, not Miller, not his wife. The same woman he had thrown out for being barren. The same woman who had once cooked breakfast for his mother every morning. Now she was untouchable. He sank to his knees, hands pressed against the wet pavement, whispering her name through sobs. Emma, please. High above, on the top floor of the building, Emma sat behind tinted glass. Her hair was perfectly tied, her face unreadable. Through the window, she could see him kneeling in the rain like a broken man. The promise she'd whispered the night she left echoed in her mind. You'll be the ones crawling. Mr. Jacobs stood beside her, silent, holding a file. Do you want me to call security to remove him? Emma's eyes lingered on Daniel for a long moment. Then she turned away. No, she said softly. Let him stay. He's just learning what silence feels like. Outside, Daniel looked up as if sensing her presence, his voice lost in the storm. Please, Emma. I'm sorry. But there was no reply, only the steady hum of rain against glass. By dawn, the world would see her again, not as the woman he left, but as the woman who had risen beyond him. The sound of applause filled the grand ballroom. Camera flashes sparkled like falling stars as Emma West stood beneath the golden chandelier of the West Group Charity Gala, her first public appearance since the scandal that had shaken half the business world. Reporters leaned forward. Influential guests whispered her name, and somewhere in the crowd her father's old partners smiled with quiet pride. Emma adjusted the microphone, her eyes steady, her voice calm but commanding. "This foundation," she began, "isn't just about rebuilding lives. It's about remembering who we are when others try to make us forget." The room stilled. She looked around, her gaze sharp but warm. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They think silence means surrender. But sometimes, silence is strategy, the space where strength grows quietly. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in as her hand rested over her heart, the same hand that once trembled while begging for love. "Forgiveness," she continued softly, "isn't letting go of justice. It's letting go of their power over you." The applause came again, louder this time. But Emma didn't smile for the cameras. She smiled for herself. Her mind drifted flashes of her journey, flickering like film reels. Daniel's betrayal, the courtroom gasp, the rain against the window. As he fell to his knees, she had been broken, yes, but she had also been reborn. Around her finger she wore no wedding ring, only a gold band engraved with the words, "West Legacy." It wasn't a symbol of love, it was a promise to herself to never shrink again. As the gala ended, the crowd rose to their feet. Emma stepped off the stage, light reflecting off the ring as she walked away, steady, serene, untouchable. Miles away, in a cheap motel room, Daniel sat alone in the dark, watching her speech on a flickering TV. His face was hollow, his eyes wet, his life in ruins. When Emma's final words echoed through the screen, he closed his eyes. "They threw me out for being barren. I gave birth to my own power instead." The screen faded to black, her face glowing beneath the spotlight, the woman who remembered who she was. And the world, now watching her rise, would never forget her name again.